what it is, what it is, what it be. Welcome to Elevated Vibes, where the journey's divine. No one's before us, none will intertwine. We're certified, bona fide, and without a doubt, the best you'll ever find.
Oh, yeah.
Elevating, bringing satisfaction, action, and peace of mind. Elevating consciousness, one mind at a time. Sit back, relax, and let your spirits climb. Let's get elevated. It's time to unwind. What it is, people. Glad to be back here in the studio. We're out our usual captain, Richard, but trust assured, he is at home honoring the ancestors. But have no fear, the co-pilot and the engineer are here. This is Elevated Vibes, intellectual radio station, and we would love for you to get involved in this intellectual revelry today. So please give us a call here at the studio at 708-223-8953. Again, that's 708-223-8953. And before we begin, I just want to give a shout out to the Bankhead Law Group. That is representation that you can bank on. Please give them a call at 312-243-4485, 312-243-8835. That's the Bankhead Law Group, the representation you can bank on.
All right. I also want to say happy Juneteenth to all the followers out there. Well, I'm hoping you all have a great one.
Well, we're going to talk about that today. All okay, right. We're going to talk about Juneteenth and what does that mean. But also because we weren't on the show last week, I do want to say happy belated Father's Day. It is a holiday that, I think goes underreported, goes undervalued. They say it's so hard to shop for the guys, and it really ain't, but, I always amazed when you go to Walgreens, there's still a wall full of cards and, Mother's Day, you can't even find envelopes,
right?
But on Father's Day, it's full. Like, it's like it'd be less birthday cards than it is on Father's Day. You're like, yo, like, I come all guys don't get no cards, nothing. Like,
Hey, we real simple that way. You know what I mean?
Are we simple, or we just don't complain enough about not being appreciated? What is?
Well, I mean, me personally, I'm very simple. If you want to give me any kind of tool or anything like that, I'm good. Yeah.
I don't want no tool. That's work. That implies work. That means I got to do something.
It depends. It depends on if you like that sort of thing. But I'm very simple. Give me some electronics or something, tool associated. I'm good.
Video game.
A video game is good too.
Video game. Nice meal. At the time, DVD or something. But I don't know. I'm always just amazed when we go and we talk about how we know the contributions that fathers make, but it just seems that, and we've talked about this on the show, the underappreciation for the role, but I think it is getting better. There was a lot of backlash a couple of years ago when people were wishing mothers or the females happy Father's Day, if you're a single parent, and the vice versa of doing that, for the single fathers, and doing that, on Mother's Day is not something that would be contemplated, but it seemed to be status quo to be accepted. But yeah, I just, as a father and someone whose father, watches from a elevated view, I truly appreciate it. You truly don't appreciate that role, even while you're engaged in it. You and I have had talks about that. And I was getting on a friend recently just because, of the situation between him and his offspring. But, I just said, ultimately a good father is training his replacement. It's like,
I agree with that.
Yeah. It's like if the biggest, we always talk about legacy and empire, but the biggest legacy and empire that you can give to your child is the ability to operate in the absence of you. So just something to pontificate on, to think on. But here we are, Juneteenth, Today we'll be diving into the cultural significance of monuments, especially on this day, Juneteenth, where we honor, I wouldn't say honor, but we point a light to a dark time in American history. We'll explore what these monuments represent, their impact on communities, and the ongoing discussion about debates whether they should be preserved or removed. Additionally, as you may have heard today, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that the 10 Commandments must be displayed in all classrooms, public school classrooms.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, good. Never doubt the state of Alabama to not follow too far behind Florida.
Well, they're definitely going to have a fight on their hands with that one. But
well, you would think so, but given the current implementation of our Supreme Court, I don't know. I'm they are doing things. What has traditionally kept the Supreme Court in line is its public perception to be above the political fray. Not only does rule of law, emanate from the government, but also emanates from the consent of those governed. And the Supreme Court traditionally recognized its role in our democracy. Like, we cannot be involved in the politics because our legitimacy stems from people believing that we are above the politics. Now, even if you didn't disagree with the decision, there was traditionally a cultural belief that, they didn't make it along partisan lines.
Right.
I think that's no longer true. I think it is a very political institution. And people are recognizing the unfairness of it when you have people who are given lifetime appointments. And what does that mean? And the balance and politics and the constitutionality of our country should not hang on politics. We need a party that's above, or need a branch that's above that, and that is only concerned with the rule of law. And we're not seeing that. So we'll talk about it. So, just as way of context, Juneteenth celebrates June 19th, commemorates the end of slavery in the United States. It marks the day in 1865 when Union General Gordon Granger announced in Galveston, Texas, that all enslaved people were free. Following the Emancipation Proclamation, Juneteenth is a significant day of reflection, celebration, education about African American history and its heritage. So with that being said, Tim, what is the proper way to celebrate Juneteenth? Like, how should we honor this day? Like, Memorial Day, we remember the soldiers who gave their all and paid the ultimate price. Veterans Day, we thank a soldier. July 4th, we barbecue, we have fireworks.
Right.
There seems to be a culture around certain holidays. How should we properly celebrate Juneteenth? What's your thoughts?
Well, Juneteenth brings about feelings of liberty, right? You should contemplate what it actually means to have liberty in this country, and what the definition of the word liberty is.
Yeah.
And that's the ability to live in a society and have freedom to explore your life in the way that you want to, and without being oppressed by authoritarian elements, right?
So how do we do all of that? Like, should it be a day of education? I know we do Black History Month. On certain days, well, on Columbus Day now we build homes, because of we have evolved to discuss the downfall or the bad things Columbus did. So, we call it Native American Day, I think Native Heritage Day or something like that.
Indigenous
Day. Thank you.
Yeah.
So how how should we manifest these ideas that you're talking about? Like, should there be specials? How do you think we should do it?
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be any specials or anything like that.
Okay.
But recognition on what it means, because this country is like very unique in this quality. We have so many different nationalities of people in this country, um, and liberty is very precious and very fragile. You always have an element that's trying to get power
Mhm.
in this country. It's different elements. You got the religious element, you have the corporations, the business elements, you
They
have
have the power.
right, you know what I mean?
They have the power.
You have the Democrats, Republicans, you have the conservatives, and you have
Progressives.
Yeah, progressives. Everybody is trying to pull power in their direction.
Okay.
So the fact that that liberty can be like the foundation that you want to strive for in this country is very important. And Juneteenth is the epitome of that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It is something that actually everybody should look towards.
Well, and that's why I want to kind of shape our discussion, because I see monuments as a educational factor to doing that. And we'll talk about this a little bit later with the South and their monuments. But I wonder, what would it be like if we had more monuments that talk about our history, especially that dedicated to those of the slaves and the evolution of from slavery to Jim Crow to indenturedness to, the passage of the Civil Rights Act. And I'm wondering, is it the lack of education, the lack of monuments, that we have this cultural divide? Like, when you hear certain congressmen saying certain things, is that willful ignorance or is that a lack of education? Like, for instance, we don't know. You would think that African-American soldiers didn't participate in World War II.
Okay.
Because there's no monuments. Like, where's the monuments? At least I'm not aware of those monuments to those soldiers, those African-American soldiers. We know about the Japanese internment, but African-Americans have had to fight in this country despite being denied their equal rights. So you think of the Harlem Hellfighters from World War I. Everybody knows about the Tuskegee Airmen, but the 761st Black Panther Tank Battalion, is the exclusion of monuments that I think create this discombobulation, this disassociation of African Americans from history. And I would love to see more monuments being put up so that we can explore this part of our history. Like, remember a couple of years ago, the big thing was the Tuskegee race riots. And people were shocked. But here in Illinois, we had almost, I think it was the second deadliest riots in the states, because we had the Springfield race riots. Where's the monuments to that?
Right.
Have you seen anything about that? Have you heard of the Springfield race riots?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Okay.
Yeah, but I haven't seen any monuments to that effect. But I guess I have a different view of monuments.
Okay.
So I think that we shouldn't be putting up monuments that kind of divide the country. You know how, like, okay, so I know it's kind of messed up. Okay, so you know how, like, the Confederate.
Hey,
right.
You jump in topics. Okay. Let's go there. Let's go there.
So you have conservatives who would like for there to be monuments about their Confederate heroes, right? They would like to have monuments. They would like to have schools down in the South with their leaders' names on them.
Yeah, Robert E. Lee. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's very controversial, because you have a lot of African American people going to those schools. You're passing those monuments in public every day, and they're going to have some issues about that, right?
Well, you're taking my arguments, because I was gonna be the bad guy tonight. I was gonna say, well, what about those? We remember from Virginia a couple of years ago when they were marching around the statue and they were saying, Jews shall not replace us. That was because of that. Remember Haley in Carolina ordered the taking down of, one of the Confederate generals, monuments. So I think we have to get into that. What you tell me your point. Let me see if I'm gonna hit the counterpoint. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So,
All right.
in my view, personally, I don't think we should be putting up monuments towards any individual person. In my view, the only monuments we should have is towards ideas.
So what about George Washington?
Take it down.
Abraham Lincoln?
Take it down.
Martin Luther King?
Take it down.
Wow.
I would take all of them down. I would only have monuments towards ideas, because individual people, they are flawed, right? And you're always going to have some. Even Martin Luther King, right? He wanted everybody to, get along in society.
Yeah.
But you're always going to have somebody,
I mean,
who's going to be for him and somebody who's going to be against him, right?
But here's the thing. We also need exemplars of people we should model ourselves by. Now, was Martin Luther King flawed? Of course. We know, that he was on the road a lot and he had company that wasn't his wife, Does that take away or diminish what he's done? Because here's the thing, and I remember this saying, you stay hero long enough, you see yourself become the villain.
Right.
Right? So is it us who put these people on pedestals and to knock them down? Or should we take them and just remember their humanity? Because, Martin, the father of nonviolent, well, not the father, but, this nonviolent movement, why shouldn't he have? Because you see what's happening, they're rewriting his legacy. The conservatives have tried to adopt him and say, well, he was for, economic this and economic that. People are always going to take your legacy, your history, and unless, for those who don't know, and use that to say what you want them to say. You know what I'm saying? So they adopt Martin and they come up with this revisionist history of what he wanted, right? And then they put that on the masses. Now, part of that is being educated. And that's what I think monuments do. I think you have to have monuments. They begin conversations. They begin discussions, and things like that. So I don't think taking away the monuments or glossing over does that. I mean, there are certain people in the human history that deserve, a monument,
Yeah, but I mean, you can find something good about almost anybody.
No,
right?
no, not the Confederates. No.
So there was an instance.
Robert E. Lee, great tactician, was considered one of the most beloved generals in American history.
I'm sure he still studied in the military.
His tactics are studied. Right. So he was an avowed racist.
He probably was.
No, probably he was.
So I mean, okay. So you can probably say something. I think that you can probably say something good about everybody. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So just check it out. So take Christopher Columbus. Remember, they used to have a lot of statues of Christopher Columbus, right? Yes, sir. So they had.
We had one in Columbus Park in Chicago, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So when they took it down, the Italians had some problems, right?
Yeah.
And they were saying that even though these things were coming out about the rape, about the genocide, about the slave labor,
the plundering,
about the plundering, all of that, they were saying that everybody was overblowing the situation. It wasn't as bad, or it was the sign of it was the time that they lived in that these things were acceptable.
Okay.
There's always an excuse, right?
Right.
So the Italians thought, hey, he's not so bad compared to what you could have had. So is that good?
So when we're having this, and I'm not sure where I'm at on it. I think that if we have this, a monument it shouldn't also just be for praise, but it can be for education so that we don't forget our history.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to have a monument to Columbus, then the epitaph or the thing under it should tell the full story.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he set sail to discover the new world, only to land where we kind of knew people already were.
Mm-hmm.
And he got here and did horrible things, and we should document that. History is neither good nor bad. It's our interpretation of it, but we can use it for educational purposes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So maybe we remake the monument in such a way that it conveys the appropriate history. You know, maybe the statue of Columbus is built some kind of way with native people bent over so we can talk about what he did,
Mm-hmm.
or we can talk about the plunder.
Mm-hmm.
Monuments are artistic forms of expression, and it doesn't have to be like Columbus opening his arms, like, yay, open to the new world.
Uh-huh.
You know, maybe it's, him with a knife and a baby in his hand. You know what I'm saying? and I'm serious. Because that makes you say, wait, what's this about? This disturbs my sense of peace, my sense of well-being.
Right. And that's my issue. I mean, so me myself, I would rather, if you want to see the history of Christopher Columbus, give him a museum. You know what I mean?
But the two aren't mutually excludable. I mean, why can't you have both? Why? I guess my question is, to your point, we're talking about these Confederate monuments, which were primarily erected during the late 19th and early 20th century. Mm-hmm. So that means in the early, 1900, these statues went up. And it was kind of, here's what the difference is. They were uplifted as heroes. Mm-hmm. So when the Robert E. Lee statue is looking out over Georgia and he got his hand out and he's on his horse, that is not an accurate portrayal. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is we can use monuments to educate people about the real history, because I think that's what's missing in our country. That's why the lack of education, the lack of knowledge of the general voter in this election is why this election is so close. There are other reasons, but there is an issue in our country where one comes in and puts one group down for the purposes of elevating another group and says, hey, we're not where we are because of them. Mm-hmm. But if you know the history of your country, you recognize, oh, we've seen this playbook before.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So,
I mean, do you think that they get historians before they build a monument or put a monument somewhere? They get like some advice from historians and say, you know what, you all might not want to put a statue of this guy because he has this and that and this issue.
I think that's the case now. I think back then, the South was, they were just livid. They just held a grudge for I don't know how long. Mm-hmm. And let's be honest, those statues and monuments of the Confederates were put in place to remind people of their place.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So
exactly.
The intent of those, regardless. Now, if you ask them, they will say these monuments were intended to assert Southern identity, values in the post-Reconstruction area, to say who the heroes of the South were. Mm-hmm. They were put in very prominent places, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're put in the middle of the park. You're on this, 60-foot high, pedestal.
Right, or at the Capitol.
Or at the,
yeah.
We just took those down. Right. So, in the Carolinas, even the Confederate flag still being interwoven into a couple of Southern states' flags and things like that. Mm-hmm. So, prominence and placement also play a role. Mm-hmm. I would definitely like to not see these monuments in such a prominent role. So that's one thing I would say. Mm-hmm. that they can be smaller monuments, and maybe towards your idea that we do things about ideas, the ideas of slavery, the ideas of, overcoming, but we can't leave out those stories either, because to gloss it over makes it seem like, oh, America had this easy. No, it isn't. We got to tell the story about Robert E. Lee and how he was a traitor. How those men who, this wasn't about slave rights, which we know that is a project that they're pushing. Why are you allowed to push that when we all know that it wasn't about slave rights? It was literally when they broke away from the Union, said this was, to keep our slaves, but in the absence of history, and the education and the taking away of the monuments, we're creating gaps in our history. And that's my fear.
So, I mean, wouldn't those gaps be better filled if you had maybe institution, a museum or something, who one side, if you want a Confederate museum down in the South.
No, we ain't doing this. No.
So, I mean, it is part of history, right? You will learn this through history books, and they do. It is part of American history.
Look, I listened to another podcast. It was on Reveal. I'm not sure what year, but it was Reveal, and they were talking about how some of these Confederate museums receive federal dollars and portray slavery and
I wouldn't agree with that
as a Southern, is a states' rights issue, and they have these reenactments, and these actors and stuff get paid with federal dollars, or if they don't get federal dollars, they have these programs, they run these collection drives to fund them. Now, what you choose to do with your private dollar, I can't say, but I think we have to have a responsible discussion about these public funding, and we'll talk about that. Who should be funding these monuments? Is this the government's idea? Is this the government's responsibility? Is it private citizens? Who do you think should be funding these monuments, or the creation of these monuments?
Well, I think that whoever has an interest. So if you have like a nonprofit group or private interest should be funding these monuments. But I since I don't believe in these monuments, then because it's more like a public space, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a public space like a courthouse, I don't think that anything controversial should be put in the.
Well, who's determining what's controversy then?
The other side. The other side.
But there's always the other side.
So okay, so that is a question. Okay,
so let's say I'll give you a perfect example. I want to make a monument to Black Lives Matter.
Right.
All right.
There's the other side to that.
There's the other side to that.
Yes.
There are people who protest and say, oh, they, in my Black Lives Matter, it's going to have Colin Kaepernick kneeling with a black fist growing out his back and hold it, and it's going to open, and it's going to be, on the scripture of the hand, it's going to say, I can't breathe.
Okay.
All right. That's my monument.
Okay.
I don't think it's controversial. I might have, as Colin Kaepernick, and all he's doing is kneeling. That's all he's doing. That's what you're going to see. Right. And then out of that statue, like it's going to be coming out his back. It's going to be like a fist that's open. And it's going to be like, that represents hands up. And then right down on here is going to say, I can't breathe. Don't take my ideas, y'all. Y'all heard it here on Elevated Vibes, right? Copyrighted June 18th, 2024 at 7:30. All right. I'm putting my copyright out there. Okay. So that's my idea. And it's going to say, I can't breathe. Right.
Right.
And then on the other side, we might have some names of those wrongfully taken by cops. We start off with Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, and all of those names. So am I being disrespectful to cops if I put that out there?
Now, being disrespectful, you might not mean it, but you're trying to interpret how they feel about that.
No, I'm not even concerned. I'm just saying Black Lives Matter.
Yeah,
Black Lives Matter, and I got my hands up, so we know what that means. That's universal sign of surrender. Colin Kaepernick just kneeling there. Now, how they gonna know it? Because I'm gonna have his jersey on. It's gonna say Kaepernick on the back with the number 09. And then, like I said, I'm gonna have the hands coming up Man, it'd be two hands coming up out the shoulders like this, hands up, with a banner across saying, I can't breathe. Is it controversial? I don't think so.
Yeah, you might not think so, but I'm sure that the police might think so. But you know what? If it's on private property, hey, go do your thing.
No, it's not private property, but I use private monies to raise it. I'm donating it to the city.
No, we're not doing that.
I'm donating it to the city. I'm putting it right in the middle of Jackson Park.
No, we're not. We can't do that. We can't use public funds to.
No, private dollars.
Okay.
To put it in a public place.
No, public space.
I got it from the group called the Black Sons of Liberty. Descendants of Black fathers throughout the time. We took up a collection. We all took up dollars, and we created this statue, this thing, and I want to donate it. And it is created all, it's all privately funded, but I want to put it in the middle of Jackson Park.
No, that's almost worse than the 10 Commandments in the courthouse right there.
What?
In the school. Yeah.
No, sir.
Yes, it is.
Why?
Okay, so
I use private dollars.
You can use private dollars for anything.
So where am I supposed to put my money?
I have $2 in my pocket. Should I be able to stick up everything I want into public spaces?
If you're making a donation to the city, and I'm using private dollars to build this monument. No public dollars went into it. Not the government's, nothing. Even the installation is paid for by the work and entity of, whoever, the Black Engineer Society. And they said we want this in our park. Right. So it's no government labor other than the permit to install this in the park.
You do not get to use public spaces for your private things. You know what I mean? For your private ideals. You don't get to use them. You can use them in private places, but not public.
So then where are we supposed to put these monuments? How are we supposed to educate?
On your property. And is it your job to educate?
We all have a responsibility to educate each other and lift up each other.
Yeah, but that would be your perspective, right? Your perspective would be, okay.
But I'm using this open forum as a park to educate people. I'm not saying it's nothing controversial about it. All I literally said was Black Lives Matter. I got a man kneeling, and I got hands coming up saying I can't breathe. What part of my monument is factually untrue? Your interpretation of it, but how you choose to perceive it, that's on you.
Right. So I would say that in that case, if I was on the other side, I would say you are disparaging the honor of police officers. You're making us all look bad.
No,
because
that's your interpretation,
right?
And art is supposed to be subject to interpretation. Now, there are some things that are so culturally significant that they can be oppressive. Like, let's say, somebody wants to put up a bronze tree with a noose hanging from it. Well, symbolically, we know what that means. All right. We know what that means. There's no cultural significance, educational significance, informational significance of that. It does not invite discussion, However, what if it was part of a project? We have movements, like, we show somewhere coming, the people getting off the boat, and we show the slave on the stand, being sold. I think part of it is context. General Lee standing in the middle of the park with his arms open like that seems to suggest that he was a good guy, right? But if we put it in context of, maybe you have Black people lifting him up, or we show Black people in chains, or we have carvings on the statue that shows the death and desecration that this man caused, and that was responsible for the bloodiest battle in American history. We can always put context in around anything, but I think it is wrong because someone may be offended by it, for it to be hidden.
Well, I'm not trying to hide it. I'm just saying to keep it out of public spaces because I think that's where the problem comes in. Like if you're in a public school, right?
Okay.
And I'm not Christian, right?
Hmm.
And you throw the 10 commandments in the classroom or even teach the 10 commandments, I'm going to have an issue because that's a public school, right? If you want your kids to have the 10 commandments, send them to a Christian school. You know what I mean? That should be out of the schools. I'm a Muslim, or I'm Hindu. I don't want my kids. I don't mind, but I don't want that to be taught to them.
Well,
You know
part
what
of
I
it
mean?
too is, and again, this educational history is, there are those who says, "Oh, we were founded as a Christian nation," and you're like, "No, not no,
Right.
no. The people who came here were trying to escape religious persecution,
Mhm.
and our founding fathers, they were kind of like worshiping trees and stuff, like you know
Right,
what I'm
right.
saying?
They were
It's like,
mostly like deists,
right, they,
Yeah.
like yeah, so and they eschewed religion. Like they saw religion as very bad
Right.
because it incited the
problem.
passions of men.
Right.
And that's why they deliberately wrote into the Constitution, you know, uh, we shall not, have religion, the separation of church and state,
Mhm.
as part of a cornerstone of the Constitution. But if you don't know, and you got people who have the perception of power and tell you this, you believe it.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying is, because something is a maybe cause offense, and it's not offensive.
Mhm.
All right. There's things that are offensive. Like there are things, putting up the middle finger, offensive.
Mhm.
You know, a noose around a black person's neck, offensive. There are things that are within the lexicon that we know are offensive and whose only purpose is to cause offense,
Mhm.
right? But a statue such as the one I described is not that. Is your interpretation. And I think that's part of the problem we have here in America,
Mhm.
is that we want to be free from being offended.
Mhm.
No, if you're an educated person, you don't have to agree with me. Reasonable minds can disagree.
Mhm.
But to remove this stuff from the public space, I think contributes to our collective ignorance.
Mhm.
And that's the problem I have.
Okay, so take one of the monuments. Take Mount Rushmore,
Okay.
right?
Who's on there? Lincoln, Roosevelt,
Washington,
Washington. Who's the fourth?
Theodore, Abraham.
Abraham. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
By all good standards, good presidents.
they were okay presidents. Okay, in terms of our leaders, they were the presidents that we look up to and say that they're pretty good, right?
I mean,
for this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Okay, so that Mount Rushmore had history, right? So
It belonged to the Native Americans.
it belonged to the Native Americans. So they seized that land.
Mhm.
And also the sculptor had an issue too. He had affiliations with the KKK.
Why is that not shocking?
Right, right. So okay, so even though it's a monument that a lot of people go to and it has a lot of publicity and stuff, and it has issues behind it. You know what I mean? So that is kind of my point. Like when you do these things, you can't get rid of the issues behind what you're trying to do. You know
I
what
get
mean?
that.
So,
but isn't this the opportunity? Doesn't this present a unique opportunity to not just focus on the history of these men, but also to open up to a broader knowledge and base of how we have treated indigenous people in this country? Like, so not only just tell the story of the four men that's up there, Roosevelt, Lincoln, Washington, whoever else, but let's talk about it in a broader context of how we got to this land and how we took it. Like this was a land that belonged to the Sioux or the Cheyenne. I can't remember who it was. But even that bothers me because I was never taught that. You know, like we should know about these different nations that inhabited our country. You know, the only way we learn about the tribes or the nations that inhabited this country is because we read about them in the slaughter. You know, the Seminoles and being marched. You know, the Trail of Tears. You know, we don't know enough about this, and I think it sets a dangerous precedent. That's why we are where we are right now. There's a I don't want to even say willful, but those that are in power have warped this history, and we let them warp this history because they keep rewriting this history. You know, you see it all the time, like, you know, oh, they want to teach this, or we can't teach anything that makes you feel bad. No one in this life promised you a life free of pain.
Right.
Feeling bad is how you make sure that other bad stuff doesn't happen again.
Right. I mean, there's a difference between making somebody feel pain and actually having pain press upon you, right? So them building Mount Rushmore actually took somebody's land. That they, you know what I mean?
Right.
Actually took somebody's land. So they have to deal with the issue. I mean, it's just not isn't it just not the fact that the presidents are sitting there, right?
Right.
They took our stuff, right?
Yeah.
They're building on our stuff as we speak. And we can say, oh, yeah, but it's for a greater cause. It's for history. No, you are.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. All I'm saying is let's talk about the history as a whole. Let's, before we tell the story of Mount Rushmore, let's tell the story of the people who lived here.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? What happens too often is we just want to focus on the good. You know, like, yeah, there was a Civil War, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and that was it. That's not the whole story, you know, and I think we do a disservice to our young people by making them think it was easy. You know, there is a chance for a broader history here. We can tell the story of the presidents, but we can also at the same time tell the story of the Native Americans who inhabit this land and what we did to them. And I'm saying that when we go to these places, these monuments, you know, this is the opportunity to present that history. And too often, and you've kind of led with this, is we want to get away from that because it makes us uncomfortable. It makes certain people unhappy. We don't have to engage in this, be fair to both sides. No, you know, my child says that they're unicorns and rainbows, and I say there's not. Do I have to be fair to them? No. We know what facts are. You know, this whole, you know, alternative facts or, you know, like, no, there has to be a common set of events and things that happen that we agree happen. That's what makes facts.
Right.
You know, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. It only applied to the slave states in revolt. You know, that's a fact. You know, it's not a fact that they were fighting for Southern rights and the right to maintain their lifestyle. No, their lifestyle was based on the indentured servitude of Africans.
Right.
There's no alternative facts. So we have, but when we engage in this whataboutism or egalitarianism, then that's not history.
But it is there, though. It is a part.
The fact that it's there doesn't make it right.
It might not hold the same weight. Right?
It don't hold no weight.
So
it don't hold no weight.
It kind of holds some weight.
No, it doesn't. No,
it kind of holds some weight.
Tim, if they come into you and saying, "Hey, this was about Southern rights," no, it wasn't. It was literally in the documents that they said this was about slavery.
Right.
You can't dispute that.
I am not trying to dispute that. I'm just saying that
there's no alternative facts. Just because you have an other side, don't make it right.
It was never right. It was never right. Let me put that and clear that right out the box. Right. It was never right. But I would say that, and I hate to say but because it always sounds like I'm about to say something terrible. Okay, so say you're taking something like slavery, right? And in these monuments, is it any value whatsoever in the fact that they had a point of view, right? And we know that their point of view was terrible, right? So is it any value at all? Even if we learn what not to do and what's not acceptable, right?
For their point of view?
From their point of view. Because
what's their point of view?
There's a lesson to be learned. There's a lesson to be learned.
No.
Because,
no.
Yeah.
No, sir.
Even if we say the lesson is that certain things like the church can get behind evil stuff, leaders can get behind evil stuff to justify what they want to do. And you have to watch out for that kind of thing, right? Because you had Christians, Baptists, you had all kinds of Christians, churches. They were back in the South because it was definitely a lesson to learn about the evils of doing something like that. Capitalism was involved, the churches was involved, people ideologies changed.
And I agree with that. I agree with that. But what I'm saying is we have to give the right history. I don't want to engage in this whataboutism. Mm-hmm. So, this was their point of view. So these museums that are talking about, oh, we treated the slaves nice and things like that. That's an oxymoron. Oxymoronic to me. Like, wait, you treated the slaves nice? How you treat slaves nice? They
right.
Yeah. So this desire to be balanced and fair, we need to get away from that. And I get it. Like, we want to have up here, but sometimes it's not things aren't necessarily have to be balanced and fair, especially when it's giving credence to caca.
Right.
It's giving credence to caca. So why are we even engaging in this lie? What I'm saying is we need more. I think I would love to see the expansion of monuments that tell the history of this country in completeness. For so long, our monuments and those that have been built to it have built towards a Eurocentric model to honor those. I mean, I tell you all the time, I watch the History Channel, and it's talking about the corporations that made America, the men that made America. And it's, you sit there and you say, well, the men that made America, like, don't get me wrong, Ford, Chase, the guy who founded Chase, I can't even think of the name of the bank, the Vanderbilts,
Rockefellers.
The Rockefellers. Sure. But there are other people who made this history. You know what I'm saying? Like, they talk about the frontiersmen, and Lewis and Clark, and so you would think that for the first quarter and half of this century that white people are the only ones who made this America great. What is missing from that story is, African Americans. Let's talk about, how we went to war with Mexico behind a lie, and took land from Mexico. We hear about the Alamo, and we call it a slaughter. Well, to the Mexicans, they called it an eviction. Right. Like this y'all in our country talking about what y'all gonna do, and but
this is just temporary displacement,
right? Like, no, this is our country, and we gonna kick you out.
Right.
The ride up San Juan Hill and all of that stuff. So, but we have to tell the truth about these stories. Where is the story to the development of the contributions of the brown people in this country? Where is the story about the Chinese labor that built the train tracks in this country? Everybody's history deserves to be valued. Can we talk about Columbus? Sure, he was an explorer, but we also got to talk about the bad too. It's no different than what we do with Martin. We know great orator, great leader, but he was flawed. And I think part of it too is we're so eager to put people up on pedestals. And I think that makes it harder to relate. Like, I can never be Martin. He was so perfect. No, Martin wasn't perfect. Malcolm wasn't perfect, but what made them heroes was that in spite of this imperfections, they did what they were supposed to do. Coming to the top of the end of the show, I come back to the question. Based on what we've said, based on our discussion about these monuments, moving forward, what is the proper way that we can honor this day, this Juneteenth? What would you like to see going forward?
I would like to see maybe more focus on the idea of liberty. Like you know what? I didn't even realize that, when you look at the Statue of Liberty, one of the biggest focuses is that the Statue of Liberty had chains on her legs, and that was a shout out to the abolitionists. I didn't know that. I thought this was just about the immigrants coming here, but that was a shout out to abolitionists, and they really felt that there should not be a thing as slavery, right?
Yeah.
I think that more focus should be focused on liberty. That should be the whole day. It shouldn't be African American liberty, or it should be our understanding of what liberty is, so that authoritarian powers don't take advantage, or the powerful take advantage of the weak. That should be the focus.
Okay. I, I'm going to take a different slight. What I would definitely like to see is more incorporation into pop America. That's how America learns now. We learn through pop, TikTok, Instagram, So I would like to see the social media influencers putting out content that talks about it, and, seeing corporations, sponsoring events and things like that. So that's how I would like to see it celebrated, use it as a day of education and a day of knowledge and things like that. So with that being said, we're going to close out the show. We hope that, you learned a little bit something about this. As always, we're grateful to have you here. Any final closing words, Tim?
Well, just say, remember Juneteenth. Remember liberty. Remember that we're always fighting. We always have to keep vigilant about, our liberty. And yep, that's what I have to say.
All right.
That. Yeah.
Closing out, I just want to say Juneteenth should be remembered as a day of gratitude. Even in the midst of your despair, remember gratitude. You can't be sad and grateful at the same time. This is Elevated Vibes.
All right. Peace.
Peace.